Hello and welcome to the Common Geeking Program. We are a book club style podcast where each episode we discuss a different topic from our own geeky and nerdy perspectives. I am your host, Jeff Leavitt, and this week we are going to be taking a look at Dune, the new one, not the old one or the book. And this time around I am joined by...
Hello, it's me, Colin. I have a lot of thoughts about the film Dune Part 1, 2021, and unfortunately you're about to hear them.
Good stuff.
Hi, I'm Untitled or Chowder, whichever you prefer. By the time we decided for sure we were gonna do a thing on Dune, it was hard to see Dune in theaters because it's one showing and a day, so I didn't get the chance to watch Dune. So I will play the role of guy who doesn't know anything, and thus will force the others to, make it easy to understand, hopefully.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even know you hadn't seen Dune.
I'm so excited because that means we have three levels of understanding. We have Chowder, which is... Actually, Chowder, I have a question. This is a very important question. Before we dive in, Dune 2021, I guess you could call it a remake because in 1984, David Lynch directed a film called Dune that was bad. I haven't seen it. Yeah. And
I have not
Chowder,
seen it either,
it seems like the kind of movie you would have seen. Is that a crazy assumption?
I have seen the David Lynch movie.
Okay, cool.
It's fucking batshit.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And not in a good way. It's just regular old, what the fuck?
It does have some really cool effects, though. They looked at it more recently on one of those VFX artists react episodes.
Yes. The square man fight. The geometry fight between the dudes. Good shit.
Well, I was just thinking about the fucking the wide shot of when they arrive on
the worm.
Arrakis, probably.
Oh yeah, that's also pretty similar.
The whole thing is they've got is done with a miniature, and then they have a hole cut out in the miniature where they have real people filming way ways back.
Yep.
So that they can
that was a really clever shot.
That's not our shtick, but
no, not at all. Anyway, so we have three levels of understanding. We have seen the original Dune adaptation from 1984. Then we have Jeff, who has seen Denis Villeneuve's 2021 Dune Part 1. And then we have me. I have not seen the David Lynch version, but before I saw this movie, I did, in fact, read the novel. So I think we're going to get get a very interesting confluence of opinions and feelings as we bring Chowder up to speed on Dune.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to start off by summarizing and discussing Dune, and then we'll end off with our little rating section where we decide if it was worthwhile and enjoyable. You guys want to get on into the summary?
So badly, baby!
Let's do it. All right. Dune. Okay, where do we want to start with this? Okay, so
I can start with this if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. You're probably going to do a more cohesive job than I am, having read the book.
Yeah, so...
and understanding some of these things a little bit better.
The backstory of what Dune is. Dune, I'm going to be making a decent amount of comparisons between Dune and Lord of the Rings, both the books and the films, just because Lord of the Rings, I think, is more of a solid anchor point for a lot of people, and there are reasons they're so closely compared. Yeah,
I was going to say, when watching the movie, it definitely gave me some Lord of the Rings vibes.
So Dune was, I think it was 1965. It was a novel by Frank Herbert. Went on to be one of the, I think it might be the best-selling sci-fi book ever. I'd have to double-check to see if that's still the case. But if not the best, one of the best-selling sci-fi novels of all time. It is a book about a lot of politics as a space empire some 12,000 years in the future, totally detached from our reality and history because of its distance, of people trying to just keep their own power. And this one group of people has moved to a desert planet called Dune. And once we move there, the politics gets intertwined with ecology. And as a result, this book is considered very dense and very difficult to read, much like Lord of the Rings.
Wait a goddamn second.
Mm-hmm.
The planet is named Dune in the book?
The planet is called Arrakis. That is the name of the planet.
Okay.
But it is colloquially referred to as Dune, which only happens once in the film.
I didn't even pick that up. But I really had no idea why it was called Dune.
And honestly, for the most part, I will just get out and say this right up front. I'm not going to have to interject about the book a ton because The movie that we're discussing,
Spot on.
remarkably accurate, which is crazy.
Unlike the David Lynch film, which is not accurate at all. Like I've seen a video where that like breaks down the differences, and night and day, very much.
So, Colin, let me try, just for my own sake, really, I would like to try to jump into the summary here a little bit and just make sure that my understanding of the general plot and, like, you know, politics of it is largely correct. So, correct me?
I'd kind of like for you to do that because most of the stuff I want to say is, like, for how complicated the book is, and this is how it's like in Lord of the Rings. I think I said this in our comment briefing program, where Lord of the Rings is very big on like the geography of things and the history of things. This is very big on the politics and the ecology. So in the same way, when the movie finally comes out and it's good, it's just like, I know you didn't get everything from the book, but how the fuck did you make it so watchable? It's so comprehensive. Like, so I'm actually really interested in you being like in this Goldilocks zone, and Chowder and I are just gonna yank you in two very different directions.
Yeah, because like Dune is something that I've been aware of for a very long time, but I never read the book. I never saw the original. I never saw the original, or saw the original movie. I knew hardly anything about it other than it was a sci-fi novel that had a movie that was bad, and now it's got a new movie. Like that was pretty much all I knew, and worms.
Yep. That's all anybody knows about Dune is worms.
Yeah.
And also that the planet's made of cocaine. Possible.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't wait to explain to you guys what spice actually is in case the first movie
cocaine that like fucking turns you into a goddamn fucking fetus teleport baby. That's what happened in the David Lynch one, right?
Yes, that is correct. Anyway, Jeff, hit me with your summary of Dune, and I will do the thing I love to do, which is correct you.
So we've got four, at least so far, four main like populations, groups of people. We've got this is the least like concrete of them, but we have the Empire, right? Like generally. Of which all of these are technically subjects of, but like the fucking like the capital T Empire kind of plays a role in this as its sort of own group pulling the strings. We've got the family of our main guys. What is their
Atreides?
Atreides, that's what it is.
Yep.
They're just a bunch of regular folk for the most part. I mean, like compared to the other ones. We've got the fucking Tusken Raiders, the whatever they're called.
The Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are the primary antagonistic force in the book and the film. That's
interesting. I did not interpret it that way.
Well, the
sorry.
You're thinking.
The
Tusken
Raiders being the people the blue-eyed people who actually live on the planet. The Fremen
are the people, I won't say indigenous to Arrakis, but they are the people that inhabit Arrakis.
Yeah, they're the most indigenous to Arrakis, if that's a fucking spectrum. And they've got blue eyes because they fucking breathe in the spice all the time and it affects them. The Harkonnen, the everyone's bald faction, that has Dave Bautista in it.
And Stellan Skarsgård is their boss. Excellent casting.
Yeah.
As the Baron. So good.
What else is he the fucking uncle or the brother or whatever in Breaking Bad? Is that who that guy is?
No, he's not. You know who he is? He's the professor in the Thor movies and Avengers.
Oh, gosh, he was under so much makeup that I didn't realize that.
Doctor, what's his name? What's his fucking name? Crap, Selvig. In the Avengers movies. Yeah,
he's really good in this. Yeah, they're the main antagonistic force. And so basically the setup of the plot here, right, is that this world, like Spider World, Arrakis, there's no spiders, but it's fucking called Arrakis. Like, you couldn't have named it something based on worms? I don't goddamn know. Whatever. It's this planet that is mostly desert, and it has this thing called spice, which is a really valuable resource for a bunch of different reasons that is not totally delved into. They use it for teleportation for sure.
So
it's maybe also a drug.
Not explicitly. So the spice, as they describe it in the film, is because Zendaya, who plays Chani, does the voiceover in the beginning. She says that without spice, the Spacing Guild cannot fly their ships at superluminal speeds. That's about as deep as it kind of goes. They say it's a psychoactive.
And I don't know what it does in the book, but in the David Lynch movie, right, isn't it that, like, fucking someone just had, like, a fuck ton of spice until they were a fetus baby that could then teleport the ships or something?
Pretty much, and that does tip sort of the hat towards what it is in the book.
I mean, spice, as far as I can tell, plays the role of like the key or the magic system of this world, where it just does whatever they need it to. I mean, like,
it goes a lot deeper than that. I will say the book is incredibly specific about what it does, but what I liked about the book, and it actually kind of like put me off at first, because the intro monologue is not too expository. It's pretty quick. It's not like the 8-minute Lord of the Rings sequence we got explaining
or like
this is
half
what
of
the rings
Suicide
are.
Squad.
Yeah, exactly. Half of the first Suicide Squad movie. But no, it's pretty quick, but it immediately describes what spice is. And in the book, it is not clear. Like, they mention that it's important, and you're viewing this through the eyes of Paul, who's a teenager, who's the main character. And, like, I take notes on the books that I write, and if you read the notes on my read-through of Dune, the underlying thread is me trying to figure out what spice is. And at the end of the book, when I finally realize it, I'm like all caps writing, like, I figured it out. And the movie doesn't spoil all of it, but it does have some pretty specific properties.
The fucking naming conventions in this fucking franchise. It's like, we have all these fucking sci-fi names and these, like, obscure tribes that are, like, you know, clearly, you know, have, like, evolved in different ways from living on different planets. And our fucking main character's name is Paul. Paul! It's the funniest
and it's
shit
like,
ever.
Here's the thing. So much of his family is also exotically named, which makes that funny. But the only other family character that sticks around for long enough to matter is named Jessica. And it's like, guys, Frank, my man, Mr. Herbert. You came up with the Bene Gesserit, the Kwisatz Haderach, Arrakis, Baron Harkonnen, the Padishah Emperor, and fucking Paul? Are you kidding me?
So anyway,
I mean, somebody has to be the white POV character.
True. Yeah, wouldn't be a white savior book without that.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's Arrakis. That's the Spice World. That's mainly where the place is set. The Harkonnens, the main antagonists, have been like the sort of ruling class on Arrakis for a very long time, and kind of, you know, subjugated and oppressed the Fremen. And the sort of, like, you know, in the prologue of this story, basically the, like, setting up, you know, the dynamics that are going on, the Empire has decided to move the Harkonnen off of Arrakis and instead give the rule of the planet over to House Atreides, who is where our main character is from, Paul Atreides. He's the prince, I guess you would call him, of the... He's like the son of the ruler of House Atreides, who is played by fucking, what's his face?
Timothy Chalamet.
Yes, I meant,
his father?
Isaacs,
Oscar Isaac plays his father, Duke Leto Atreides.
Yeah. So, that's kind of the pre-set up narrative here. Is like, that's the thing that, you know, is kind of the driving force of the movie, is now House Atreides is moving to Arrakis. And, like, it's supposed to be this great honor because, like, Arrakis made the Harkonnen, like, absurdly wealthy, like, even more wealthy than the Empire, because they were the ones that controlled the in and out of the spice, which is, like, the most valuable, you know, everything resource in this setting.
Yeah.
Then there's this whole other dynamic with, like, fucking... So, like, that's Paul from his dad's side, but his mom is, like, some fucking, like, witch or some shit that may or may not be related to spice. And it gives him, like, this superpower to, like, have a voice where he can just tell people what to do. That part I was a little wishy-washy on the exact specifics of, but
the movie glosses over that pretty quickly, but I can explain this from the context of the book. So, Jessica is a member of an order called the Bene Gesserit. I think something I actually want to compliment the movie on is, like, it uses, you know, different languages, it uses subtitles, and it uses the voice, as you described. And the subtitling of that is pretty clever because someone saying the words Bene Gesserit in conversation, it's nonsense words. It just bounces off your skull. I think the movie was pretty deliberate in like when it subtitled things to make sure that you not only heard these things, but you did get to read them at least once. I'm not saying you'll always get that on your first viewing, but that's something I want to compliment. Like that was pretty deft and pretty clever. But the Bene Gesserit is an ancient order of people trying to produce something called the Kwisatz Haderach. The Kwisatz Haderach is essentially like a super person, someone that
the chosen one, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of a chosen one arc. I really like how the book subverts the chosen one narrative, and the movie seems like it's on its way to replicate that. But essentially,
because,
the Bene Gesserit,
the implication, right, is that the whole reason why his mother had him in the first place is because she was thinking that he was going to be this chosen one. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Bene Gesserit is a completely female order, and basically, if Mother Helen Goheim, who's the lady who did the box thing, the Gom Jabbar, she says, like, you were supposed to have a girl, implying that you can control the biological sex of your child, but you chose to have a boy. And it's like they have been planning the genealogy for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of figured this was just like, you know, how it was in real world medieval Europe, where like they just blamed the women for having girls, even though that's not in their control. Really just seems like your fault for having a patriarchal government, but okay.
Well, that's the interesting thing is in the politics of the book, the Bene Gesserit are very powerful. The movie pays lip service to it. It just doesn't spend a lot of time on it. Like we see the Bene Gesserit coming to Caladan, the planet where Atreides begin. It's a lovely ocean planet, and they're coming there, and you're like, okay, they're talking about their plans to control everything. And then you see that same lady go to the Harkonnens on their planet, Gadi Prime, and talking to them. So, like, the Bene Gesserit are this sort of agnostic group that have their own agenda of trying to create the super person. I also want to explain a concept that the movie doesn't, which is the Mentats. So do you guys remember in the movie, Chowder in the old one, Jeff in the new one, there's a character named Thufir Hawat. If you don't recognize the name, in the new movie, he was sort of the short, stout guy with the black line on his chin, and he like rolled his eyes back into his head and did some crazy calculations.
Yeah, vaguely. Like, I remember that specifically. I don't remember anything else about it.
Yeah, his character, I imagine, will be a lot more in part 2, but he's a Mentat, as was David Damalshian's character, who also had the weird little lip tattoo. Mentats are are like human computers. In the
fucking,
history of
the like second in command of the Harkonnen, the fucking Polka Dot Man, that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Polka Dot Man from the Suicide Squad. We've now referenced Suicide Squad and the Suicide Squad. So if the naming of Dune on its own wasn't confusing enough, let's get into DC.
No, fuck it. Let's get into the Fox X-Men movies.
So just real quick, in the world of Dune, you cannot create a computer that would serve the purpose of a person. The idea of humanity is very important. So Mentats are trained to be human supercomputers. And in the book, it explains that Paul has been receiving Mentat training, but secretly it was the Bene Gesserit trying to like push him in a specific direction without him realizing it. That's some context that the movie kind of leaves out. And it plays into the idea that this stuff like the voice and the stuff like this predicting the future, the book never portrays it as magic. And in the movie, I like that it kind of looks like magic, but it is meant to be more grounded. Like, these are just supposed to be scientific and skill advancements.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, they don't really explain. I'm guessing, like, you know, there's, like, lots of points where it seems like context is missing in the movie that... I'm, you know, inclined to give to the benefit of the doubt and just assuming that they're waiting to, like, you know, not drop all of their exposition in one movie and save some concepts that don't really, you know, matter so much in the first one for the second one, you know? Like, drop hints that they exist, in the same but way. Not bother explaining everything. Like, that feels like it makes sense.
You're right about that. If its attachment to the book is anything to go off of, part 2 will have a lot more answers than... questions.
Right, yeah. And so these are our factions and the roles that they play largely. So they're on Arrakis now, the Arcades family, and like
the Atreides.
Part of
Atreides is on Arrakis.
Atreides, sorry, I'm gonna say it wrong. I'm gonna say it wrong a lot.
That's fine.
Atreides. I don't know what the fuck Arcades is or where that's coming from. It just fucking sounds similar. But
Arrakis and Atreides, they come together and they form an excellent chain of video game establishments.
So the Atreides family is on Arrakis now, which also, you know, if we fucking didn't mention the other big thing about Arrakis is the fucking giant worms that swim through the sand and try to eat shit all the time is another thing that makes the planet very dangerous. So like part of the conflict here is that they're finding that like a lot of the like conditions of the like resources and tools and shit was they're kind of like left in disrepair from the Harkonnen family, and there's this whole thing about like basically they're being set up to fail, you know, being the family now put in charge of this hugely important thing, which does kind of turn out to be the case, right? Like it turns out that you know, the Empire, like it's unclear if this was like if the Harkonnen knew about this from the get-go or were like brought into the circle later,
think so.
But
I think something that I liked, what I worried about coming into the movie is like, how are you going to boil down these politics into something like both interesting and comprehensible? But the movie's super streamlined because on Caladan, right before they leave, the Duke says to Paul, his son, like, this is a trap. We are becoming powerful, and the Empire doesn't like that. So they're doing this to fuck us over and fuck over the Harkonnens. And like in the book, it's pretty. It's like you really need to like read a lot into the politics. It's like 8 or 9 chapters before they really get into that. But like that one conversation on Caladan summed it up in a way that I was like, kind of wish the book did that. Honestly, like you don't have to detract from the complexity, but that really helped. That was very concise.
That part of it made sense to me, especially like throughout the movie. The thing that I wasn't sure about, was whether the Harkonnen were equally being manipulated by the Empire, or if they were like
the Harkonnen
in on it.
Are also gaming for power, for sure. And in the book, we actually do see a little more from the POV of the Baron, but you see it in the movie too. He's like working with his nephew to try to like he's also trying to game the system. That's why he's working with the Bene Gesserit. Like it's all politics and money. I actually want to ask,
implication that he is the way that he is because of spice, like able to fucking float and shit.
No. Him able to float. Being able to float is just because like he's overweight and he uses like anti-gravity technology to help him move around. It's like a
gotcha.
And I really like the aesthetic of it. I haven't seen the original Chowder. 2 questions. One, at this point in the description of Dune 2021, does this sound at all like it matches what happened in the first movie, or is there like an extreme difference here?
Shit. Let's see. Yeah, they didn't put a lot of thought into the politics of Dune. They just kind of were like, oh, you're the chosen
like David
one.
Lynch just wanted to make a trippy flick about some fucking sci-fi shit. They didn't care about the
For one thing, they don't really talk that much about the Empire. And like,
doesn't Sting just come out as the Emperor at the end of the movie, and that's kind of like out of fucking left field?
He also comes out in a Speedo. That's kind of the problem. I was mostly distracted by the Speedo to be paying attention.
We all.
No Speedos in Denis Villeneuve's interpretation. But that's
disappointing.
I mean, so Jeff, you're missing the context, but so far, honestly, like you've got it correct, and like it would properly summarize both the book and the film. Yeah,
and it like it's weird because like the movie takes its time with a lot of things, but like the politics, like there's a complexity to it, but there's also kind of like a simplicity to it. Like there aren't that many things to break down. It's just it doesn't like lay everything out for you. It just like I mean it does and it doesn't. You know,
I view this as a favorable comparison to Lord of the Rings. Like again, if you got politics for Dune, geography for Lord of the Rings, And like in the books, they are J.R.R. Tolkien is so detailed about like where they're going, where it is in relation to everything else, and like it's hard to follow without a map because he is so explicit. And in the movie, they're like, we need to go to the Pass of Caradhras, and it's like, what the fuck does that mean? And then you see them on top of a mountain, you're like, I don't care what they just said, we're on a mountain now. And it's like, I think both movies really get a good grip on how to boil it down, so like you have just enough to get by. But you also have questions, and you can go to the book for answers if you want.
Yeah, because saying that it's like really deep on politics or whatever is just like, at least so far, it's like, largely it's simple. It's kind of rich with the politics, but it's not like, it's not super complicated.
Yeah, the problem with the David Lynch movie is it's just like the Baron is the bad guy who like is behind all the shit going wrong.
Yeah, and that is an oversimplification.
Yeah, exactly. And like he's not like the cunning, charismatic dude playing for power in the book. He's just a big, fat, ugly bastard who just yells and does weird shit.
He is not charismatic. He's cunning, but he is not charismatic at all. But no, I think that's a credit to the movie, Jeff, because like the politics are rich in the book, very, very rich. I think that is most of the intrigue of it, aside from learning about the planet itself. But it doesn't become a distraction the way I was worried it would be in the movie.
Yeah, no, I would say that. So I mean, like if we want to get through like the rest of the plot again, like it's it takes its time with a lot of things.
There's not a lot of plot, honestly. It's
not
pretty
ton.
moody.
Like basically, like the Harkonnen kind of end up coming and invading Arrakis to like take their shit back, and
not before we get introduced to the effects of the spice and seeing a sandworm.
Right? Yeah. True, we do get to see a sandworm, and we also get a little bit of characterization for fucking Oscar Isaacs because he's in charge of this hugely profitable planet. He's like the leading head of a ruling class or whatever, but he cares more about getting the fucking 12 people working on the thing out instead of saving the spice. So that's some good bit of characterization.
Yeah, and it was and there's another character here named Shoot. It's a Fremen. You don't know it's a Fremen. They're the planetary ecologist named Leavitt Kynes. In the movie,
we don't know she's a Fremen. She's got fucking blue eyes.
She does, but like she plays all coy. Also in the book, definitely was a white dude, and I was pleasantly surprised by the gender and race agnostic casting of this character because this actress, I gotta look up her name. She kicked ass. But basically, like this person is supposed to be an impartial arbiter of the transition of power, but also has no power to like report anything to the Empire. So like. Their one advocate sees that the Harkonnens blew up all their shit and sabotaged all their escape things, and is just like, I don't know, get fucked, guys, sorry. And then that's why fucking Oscar Isaac, the Duke, is like, we're about to lose this fucking spice harvester, and I need to get my men out of there. And it's a very flashy sequence. Have we said that this movie is stunningly gorgeous?
It is, yeah. It's got a lot of like really great effects, like the fucking and it gives you the time to look at them, but it's not like super flashy,
Yeah.
Like the fucking the like dragonfly helicopter things.
Yeah, the ornithopters are very true to the
fucking.
books.
I think I saw a YouTube video, like a thumbnail of a YouTube video of someone breaking this down, and I don't know if like the fucking like mechanics of the sandworm were broken down, but it was really interesting. Like the when the sandworms start showing up, the ground starts like bubbling in a sort of way, which is really I don't know if that's like a recent thing that some effects artists added into it, or like the scriptwriter or whatever, or if that was like baked into the original source material. But like if you've seen any YouTube videos of like what happens when you put like air, like a specific like air pump into sand, it basically makes it like really liquidy, which kind of like. It's sort of like, without really going into it, but just like as a visual cue, if you are aware of that scientific principle, it explains how the sandworms actually like swim through the sand instead of just, fucking like, being in that fucking Scrooge McDuck kind of problem where it's like, oh, you think you could jump into a pile of gold, but you would hit the ground real hard because it is solid matter.
The book goes into a lot of how the worms actually function, but it leaves that out.
Yeah, there are actual animals in real life that can like swim, I guess, quote unquote, swim through sand, although they tend to be
but
small.
the fucking sandworms are gigantic.
size-
Yeah,
the
they tend
amount
to
of
be
sand
they
that would
tend
have
to be
moved
small
around.
lizards and snakes,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
big fuck off worms.
So yeah, the visual that we're seeing, like when fucking Josh Brolin, Thanos, what's it, Gurney Halleck and Paul.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, because Paul, like when they're
He's
trying to
cool.
evacuate the harvester, Paul gets hit in the face with the spice, and all his dreams that he's been having get like way more intense. So Thanos has to yank him out of there, and the sand.
Bro, you were tripping out.
Exactly. But the sand, it does seem to like gain liquid properties as they sink into it and they barely escape. It's visually stunning, and it did quickly teach me like, oh, this is a property of sand that I hadn't considered. And having read the book, it doesn't get into like the emulsification of sand at all.
Which is so fucking cool because like I
visual
definitely
effects
would
and
be
design
sitting
are
there being
so
like,
thought
wow, worms can't really swim through sand if they're that big. And adding that effect for the visual is like the fucking like sciencey
so
part of my
thoughtful.
brain looks at it. I'm like, I fucking love that someone thought of that as a stupid explanation for how that actually works. Cause like, that's so fucking cool.
The attention to visual detail is so key in teaching about the world, because like the book dives into a lot of stuff in detail. Movies can't do that and still be interesting. So the amount of detail that they have to pay to the shields.
Yeah, just like having the entire plot and movie just stop and they just like turn to the camera and go, okay, so this is how sand works.
Yeah. And the movie is so deft at it. Just like even the attention to like how heat would affect light passing into the camera and the way that you can see the heat off the sand looking different from the heat from the engines of things. The way that shields work, because people have personal shields, buildings have shields around them. Like early on when Gurney Halleck and Paul are training, Paul is told you can't just stab, you need to like push something slowly through the shield to penetrate it. And we see
sort
that
of like it fucking reminds me of, you know, like fucking non-Newtonian fluids, you know, like when you hit them they feel solid but otherwise they're liquid. Like that's the kind of vibes that it gave me, which is really cool.
That's a detail in the book. The book actually has something where, like, if you shoot the shields with an atomic weapon, because, you know, it was written in the 60s, we thought everything was going to be nuclear. But, like, if you hit something with an atomic-based weapon, the shield creates a massive explosion. So, like, nobody uses guns around shields. The movie skips over that and just leans into this fact.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty boring,
that's something
but
I really like about...
visually incredible how they communicate it.
Yeah, that's something I really like about Dune is that, like, it finds an elegant explanation for why is everyone using swords and hand-to-hand combat in the future. And the answer is they have these shields that work better against fast-moving objects such as bullets, but can't stop slow-moving objects.
And Chowder, not to spoil some of the visual effect shots, but what we see with the shield, so like Jeff said, after the Harvester scene, the Harkonnens attack to try to take the planet back. And we get scenes of like a poison dart going through the Duke's personal shields, and like it hits his shield and it stops and it like spins and spins and spins and slowly drills through before hitting him. And then we see that happen on a macro scale where they're dropping these orbital bombardments on the buildings. The fucking bomb drills through the shield, explodes. The explosion fills the volume and shape of the shield, and then the shield pops like a bubble and the explosion spills out. And it's like, this
so
is not just
cool.
beautiful and cool to watch, like cool on the sci-fi level. It's like, instead of being wordy like the book, this is how it teaches you the mechanics of the world. And I'm so in love with it as
illustrative of like the cool sci-fi mechanics in addition to being beautiful, you know?
Yeah, and
it's big explosions and fun and action and stuff, but it's like, you know,
making a movie,
it paints a picture for you if you're paying attention to those kinds of details.
Yeah, and when designing this as a film, you need to think very far in advance, like when writing the script. Like, do I need to put this into words, or how am I going to communicate this? And clearly, it's all thought out. And it seems like maybe that level of thought, I don't know how much it was given to the original Dune. I don't want to tell tales out of school, but the reputation precedes it.
They never addressed the shields except for like this one scene where they have a duel and they are covered in
rectangles.
In rectangles. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
they are covered in rectangles, and they
they only fight while cosplaying as Minecraft Steve in the original Dune.
Yeah. And like that's the only time the shields ever come up. Otherwise, they just don't.
Wait,
explain.
that's it? They don't come up for the rest of the fucking movie?
Yeah.
Then why would you have an entire expository scene? I understand that the studio cut like an hour out of the movie.
Again, it's just to show off the trippy visuals.
No.
Like,
the duel is like a plot point, but like they use the shields in that duel, but like they never use the shields out beyond that duel.
That's so weird because like we have the same.
Expensive. Like it takes a lot of. They're not fucking
That's
even
true.
using computer graphics to do that shit. They're just like
that's true. It was all like
painting on invisible cubes, you know.
Yeah. But like the thing is, in the books, the shields are like these mostly invisible things that like if you're paying attention, you'll see a small shimmer. That probably would have been easier than CGI cubes.
They weren't CGI though. That was before the wide use of CGI. It was like literally.
It was 1984.
Anyway.
It was only 2 years after Tron, so it had only come so far. But yeah,
I thought they were using the Tron
effects,
tech, but okay, I see.
But yeah, the Harkonnens invade it, and it sort of scatters everyone. Jeff, I don't know if you want to pick up your interpretation any further.
Well, yeah, so that was one of my complaints of the, I mean, it might, you know, obviously, like, staying true to whatever, but, like, we get introduced to a number of characters, and almost all of them die in this movie, and it's just like, well, then maybe we could have spent a little bit more time characterizing the ones who ended up living, rather, you know, like, I get it, you don't want to show your hand or whatever, but, like, almost every character in this movie dies.
Yeah.
And it's
so the only character
the start of the sequence, like,
of...
Oscar Isaac's character dies, and with that dart, like, you know, Colin said.
The dart actually doesn't kill him.
Yeah, the dart doesn't kill him, but then we find out exactly, like, how is, like, their family doctor, or, you know, basically his like wife and child, I think, were kidnapped by the Harkonnens or something to that effect, and they were basically like, you know, saying like, oh, we'll let them go if you know, betray your family, and he's like really reluctant about it, but you know, he's got to do it. So he explains this all to Oscar Isaacs, who's paralyzed from this dart, and then he's like, here, but also, like, fuck those guys who kidnapped my family. Here's a fucking, like, poison mist tooth that you can put in your mouth, because they're defo gonna kill you. So right before they kill you, just squash on this tooth and kill all of them, too. And he does that, except the fat man probably, goddamn, God only knows why, since he was, like, he was the closest person to him. He's able to survive this, and they put him in like a detox bath or whatever, and that's largely where he is for the rest of the movie.
The movie makes a lot of hay about like this is a trap. The Atreides family being given Arrakis is a trap, but that's kind of the most that we're told until the place actually gets invaded. You know, like we know the Baron's planning it, but then we see the invasion, and then it reveals that the Doctor betrayed them. The Doctor, who has not really been in more than 2 scenes before this. In the book, there's actually an entire chapter from the Doctor's point of view explaining his situation and, like, the struggle he's going through. Gurney Halleck actually misinterpreted stuff from the Doctor and thought that Jessica was the one who betrayed the family. And, like, that... the movie didn't really set that up. And so in what would be part 2... Thanos may actually, like, try to kill Paul's mom if they do follow up on that.
Oh, he's alive.
A piece of intrigue. According to the book, Gurney Halleck is absolutely alive. But all the other characters,
because they didn't really like. They kind of just drop off with him because like they basically he's like the person like leading the charge into battle, and then we just see like a fuck ton of explosions, and we don't see him die specifically. But I had assumed. So that's good.
Honestly, in the book, I had assumed he died too, and then he just popped up later. So you'll probably see more of him. The ones who do die, though, we see the dad, a man whose name we have. The dad dies because he crunched on that tooth. The Dr. Yue is killed. The betrayer is killed. There's another character whose name we haven't mentioned, which is, you want to talk about strange naming. You have Paul, you have all these crazy sci-fi names, and then you have a man named Duncan Idaho. And it's just...
He's played by Jason Momoa.
He's played by Jason Momoa. He's a soldier for the Duke that is like really friendly with Paul. He also eats the big beef in the sky at some point in this movie, which is sad but again, very by the
he was
book.
the one I was expecting to live because they're pretty sparse.
They built him up
in the movie. Yeah, they talk about him a lot, and he's like, but he doesn't actually show up for like that many scenes or anything like that. So I was a little surprised that he ended up dying.
I wanted to mention Duncan Idaho.
His name actually gives me questions about the setting of this movie. Is this is Dune set in our reality in the far, far, far future, or is it like a Star Wars like far, far away galaxy kind of shit?
It is explicitly in our future, I believe.
Okay.
Is it 12,000 years or 50,000 years? I also just read Foundation, so I might be confusing some stuff between Dune and Foundation. But yeah, basically, like in the
Duncan Idaho, his name is specifically referencing the
likely
state of
referencing
Idaho.
the potato stato. Because like the appendices of the book Dune outline like all the history leading up to it, the development of the Orange Catholic Church and the Bene Gesserit and all the politics that went into it. And we don't even hear the term Orange Catholic in the movie, which I'm like, that's a good idea, because a lot of people would be very confused by that. Because I sure as hell still am. But yeah, getting out of the Harkonnen attack, Jessica and Paul crashed one of their dragonfly ornithopters in the desert, and they gotta hang out in that piss tent before they try to escape.
Yep, that is what it is.
I guess there was a line in the 1984 version. The book is very detailed about how the still suits keep water in your body and keep you hydrated. But I guess there was a line in the original Dune that said feces and urine are stored in the thigh pads. And I'm like, I could have used that kind of detail in this movie because that's a fantastic sentence.
Gross.
Yeah, also, like, I don't know if this is the best place to drop it in, but there's this whole dynamic of, like, the sandworms, like, specifically sensing, like, their prey through sound and vibrations and shit through the ground or whatever.
So they have regular rhythms set them off.
Right, so, like, when Paul and Jessica are, like, traveling through the desert, they have to like use this specific like Fremen walk that Paul learned about by studying the planet. That's like this arrhythmic sort of walk where they're not where they just sound like the natural like rhythms and shit of the desert, which I thought was a cool detail.
Yep.
And it also is like, hey, it pays off to actually give a shit about the fucking planet that you're colonizing, I guess. Even though, it's a whole weird thing in this.
It is. That's also an explicit theme of both the book and the movie, is that the Harkonnens were like, we're here to exploit the planet. And then it is still white saviory, and people are wondering, like, are the movies going to do anything better about this? But the Atreides are at least coming in with the idea of, we want to elevate you and like
we want to work with the Fremen, and and there's like a whole lot about that narrative that seems like it's sci-fi, so it's far removed enough that you can be like, okay, yeah, sure, this one rich family is actually full of good people and they're trying to do the right thing, right? But there's a part of that narrative that I feel a little bit uneasy about for the white savior reason, where it's just like, but who are we comparing this to? Because because that doesn't really exist.
I don't think that's going to get much better in part 2. Well, and this is actually a good point to bring up. When they're hanging out in the piss tent trying to survive the night, Paul sort of catalyzed from the spice. His dreams take on a much more vivid form, where he essentially prophesizes a war between the Fremen and the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar, which are Empire forces that that are working with the Harkonnen. A lot of hay about that in the book that I'll get into if you're curious, but like...
Okay, wait. Hold on.
Yes.
Real quick, just to drop back here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Chowder, are you following? Does this make sense? Do you have questions?
I have many questions.
After Colin just jumps through an entire sentence that is mostly Dune made up word.
Okay. So the plot so far is the Harkonnens are getting really rich off the spice that they found on Dune,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
Yes.
and so the Empire doesn't like that they're getting so rich, so they have the Harkonnens put the Harkonnens on a job that they know the Harkonnens are gonna get fucked on. So trap, right? And
No.
No.
Well, yeah. The Atreides get put on the job that will fuck over the Harkonnens.
Okay,
yes,
the
I assume
Atreides
You said
gets put
Harkonnens
on-
twice. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, the Atreides get put on the job that'll fuck over the Harkonnens and
themselves.
And so
So the Harkonnens, like before the plot of the movie started, they were the ones on Dune getting rich off of it.
Yeah.
The Empire moved them off Dune and put the Atreides there instead.
okay.
The Atreides were the ones that were like that the Empire was worried about them getting too much power. Also probably the Harkonnen, but like that's the one that it's like that's our people, and so by being moved onto this world, the Empire is setting them up to fail so that the Harkonnen can come and invade and take back what they had originally, basically. Does that make sense?
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And
so it's a little it's a little flip-floppy where it's like, you know, before the movie starts, the Harkonnen are the ones on Dune, and then the plot of the movie is the Harkonnens taking back Dune from the Atreides. So it's a little weird if you miss a detail or two, because then it's like, wait, were they the ones who were here, or are they the ones who were invading? It's both.
I think I know that this is a pretty complicated bit of detail. The movie, honestly, the plot really is that simple. Harkonnen have Dune, Atreides have Dune, Harkonnen take Dune back. That's pretty much where we are in the movie right now. But like, it does speak volumes to the version of the movie you have seen, Chowder, that was still not very apparent at this point in the conversation, even though you've watched an adaptation of the book.
Yeah,
as a failure of vision. But I'm blaming the movie, not you. I want to be very clear in that. I think
I got that.
You've not been given a fair shake. So I guess that's where we are. So okay, before I start rambling, I don't want to just go down my own rabbit holes. So do you guys have any questions of me that might clarify what's going on in either film?
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
Is there like in the 2021 movie, is there like a kid who's like super powerful God Jesus thing, or does that just not happen at that point?
I mean, that's sort of Paul, but he's
no, not Paul, like a girl.
Yes. Okay.
Oh?
So there are there are a couple things. A lot of the stuff that you just sort of touched on involves characters named Aliyah, Chani, and Fade Rautha.
Yep. Those are the characters. Yep.
Yes. Chani is played by Zendaya. She delivers the opening monologue, and we do meet her at the end of this movie.
Yeah, she's like largely not in the movie. Like, she gives the opening dialogue. He sees her in visions, and then she shows up as an actual character in the last like 10 minutes.
Fade Rautha. I think Fade Rautha is if you're talking about a Jesus kid, I think that's who you're talking about. Fade Rautha of the Harkonnen house. Is hinted at in this movie in an exchange between Jessica and the Bene Gesserit. Like, they're aware of Fade Rautha, but never mentioned by name, does not show up. I assume will show up in part 2. The girl...
I just haven't cast them yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
because here's the thing about the David Lynch movie. It tries to shove the entire book into one movie. And like the 2021 movie, from what I'm understanding, just adapts part of the book, and part 2
so actually that was a big question a lot of us had going in, is where's the book going to split? The book is actually split up into 3 books. The longest is book 1, and then book 2 and 3 are shorter. This basically cuts off right at the end of, quote, book 1 in the book. So now the part 2 looks like it's just going to be those second 2 parts. And that's where the characters you've mentioned come in, so we don't see them here.
Gotcha. Like, part of my confusion is simply, because like I'm like construing parts that happen in later parts of the book, but like the movie doesn't ever get there, and so
that's totally fair. So at this point, as we sort of paused our summary in the piss tent here after the escape from the Harkonnens. Jeff, do you have any questions for me before we
one more
proceed?
question?
Oh yes, Chowder.
You're saying piss tent, right?
Yes.
Like that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
it fucking it takes their pee and it fucking purifies it and gives them shit to drink to keep them hydrated.
Gotcha.
That's why he's calling it that. Yeah.
I did like what I did like about the visual design of this is the piss tent. I'm pretty sure it had a straw. I know the suits have these straws in them, but like the tent had a straw in it that they could drink of, and that just made me think of like those cups I had as a kid, where you could like the cup was the straw, and I would just like suck the chocolate milk through the cup itself. Really gave me those vibes. The piss tent.
Yeah,
did.
the tent had like fucking veins that it was like moving the liquid around in.
Again, really cool,
Weird.
subtle visual design. They never explain how it works, but like you just kind of get it. Paul says Paul says in his like breathy voice like, it recaptures the water. I'm gonna piss all over this tent, but that's kind of all we get.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage. The way you just said.
I'm gonna piss all over this tent.
So let's follow a few of our characters. I
do want to emphasize, just because it'll be important for part 2, when in the piss tent, the spice drives Paul crazy, and he has a vision of an upcoming war between the Fremen and other people, and he's very, very worried about it. That's all I want to say. He's very worried about this vision.
And he also, like, all of his visions have prominently featured Zendaya's character. Zendaya, whichever. And yeah, so like, which, you know, it's I'm not sure if they're just fucking setting it up and being like, oh, he's really horny for this girl that he keeps seeing in his dreams, or
the book does it too. The book is a lot more subtle. The movie's pretty explicit about how the visions manifest to Paul. In the book, I'm gonna confess, maybe I just missed the details, but like I didn't totally get that he was having these visions. It was pretty abstract about how it described his dreams and how they were important to him. But in the visual medium, you can't hide the fact that, like, oh yeah, that's Zendaya. I saw her in Spider-Man. Like, you're not going to hide that fact once you put her on screen. So they lean into it. But the book is a lot more subtle about exploring how these mentat and these Bene Gesserit abilities are growing. I think the movie does a good job, but I think it's limited by the fact that it's visual.
Interesting. Yeah. So what is the name of our person who's like the fucking the woman who's Fremen, who's like an ambassador for the fucking
the ecologist Kynes, Kynes, Kynes.
So I mean, I was having a hard time following like her fucking motivation. She is helping them, right? Like
I found her glossed over the first time I watched the movie. The second time I was like, oh, they put a lot of detail in there, but it's very blink and you'll miss it. She is She ends up dying. She doesn't have any. Yeah, she doesn't have any power. So she ends up just saying like, "Fuck this! I'm not gonna operate as the ecologist. I'm gonna operate as a Fremen and try to get you guys the hell out of here." So she and Duncan Idaho, they both beat. So on the way out.
She helps them escape, and then ends up she like puts a thing in the ground that like specifically creates a rhythmic thing so that a sandworm comes in and eats.
This is actually the most divergent moment from the book so far, because explicitly what happens, Duncan Idaho kills a bunch of soldiers and dies in the process while Kynes leads them out. And Kynes like says, you guys get in this ornithopter and fly away, go fly into the storm. I'm going to go lead these guys out. She does exactly what you said. She puts the thumper in the ground, calls a worm, and it eats them all. It's kind of like that in the book, but she doesn't do it in the book, he doesn't do it as a sacrifice to kill the other people. He does it after being chased away and wounded in the desert.
Yeah, that's what happened in the movie, too.
Well, yeah, but like in the movie, it was kind of like this cool, like, I'm taking you with me thing where the soldiers are right there on her, and she summons the worm.
She puts the thumper in the ground, and then
which does not happen in the book.
No. What I'm saying is she puts the thumper in the ground and is about to dip, and then someone shows up behind her and stabs her. Yeah. And then they have this tussle, and then like as a last bit of, hey, we're over here, she pounds the ground with her fist, and then the worm comes. So I don't think she intended to die in that exchange. It was just because
when she put out the thumper. Yeah, she took out these weird climbing instruments, which become more apparent at the end of the movie what they're for.
Oh, you're right. She put down the thumper because she was going to ride the worm out of there.
She's going to ride the worm. My nickname in high school. And so what happened in the book was Kynes was injured and ended up landing on sort of like a precursor patch to spice. The spice is shown in the movie as just like sort of like a cinnamony, like darker red sand on top of the real sand. But in the book, it explains that there are these patches of material that need to gestate, and then they explode, and then they become spice. And in the book, what happens is Kynes is just thinking about the politics and the ecology of the planet, trying to think like, oh God, I wanted to turn this place into a paradise. I wanted to bring all the water to the surface. I wanted to save everyone. And then basically the pre-sand patch explodes and then blows him into the mouth of a worm. So like it's kind of the same, but it like the movie uses this as an opportunity to give you an action hero moment and to explain the thumper visually, whereas the book uses it to explain like what they're doing on Dune in the first place, what their goal is, which is hinted at in the film, is they wanted to make this like a paradise.
Right, because that's this whole dynamic, right? Is that like originally when they went onto the planet, like, you know, hundreds of or thousands or whatever years ago, they were going to like terraform it and actually make it like a more livable world. But then they discovered the spice and how valuable it was. So they're like, oh, we have to keep this place a fucking desert wasteland. So it's kind of this whole like, oh, they're profiting off of the planet by not making it better. It's sort of like a reversal of, you know, of like typical, like, you know, environmental destruction for the sake of profit. In this one, it's like, oh, we just neglected making it a good planet because of the naturally occurring resources and stuff like that, which is a weird twist, but it's an interesting dynamic. So yeah, Kyne dies, Duncan Idaho dies. Eventually, like after, you know, getting out and being in the piss tent, they get out of the desert and like find like more solid rocky ground, and then they're met with a tribe group, I don't know, of the Fremen.
Of Fremen, led by a character that we actually did meet earlier in the movie named Stilgar, who's like seems to be like he seems to be like a leader of a group. He was like, you know, when we met him earlier, he showed up and he was, you know, being like, yo, fuck you, fucking rich man, new rich person coming onto my planet. And then he sort of ends up being swayed by like basically what fucking Oscar Isaac is saying, because he's saying like, yo, we don't want to do that, we don't want to oppress you like the fucking Harkonnen did, we want to work with you. And he's like skeptical, but seems to be like, you know, get some hope from that. But yeah, so Paul at least recognizes Stilgar, but that doesn't change the fact that some people in this group are not happy that they're accepting strangers. And then there's a ritual fight.
Yeah, which seemed a little...
It was pretty rushed in the movie. In the book, it was like they were traveling over the course of like a couple days.
That would make more sense.
But it is super compressed in the movie to the point where I don't think it totally flows. But like the Fremen recognize that Jessica is a, quote, weirding woman. She has the, quote, magic of the Bene Gesserit, which again is explained in the book as just advanced knowledge of physiology. And they don't like that. And that disagreement of having her with them because they don't like her powers kind of leads to...
So why don't they fucking fight her to the death?
Well, because what happens is they're challenging her, but she subs in Paul as her champion. So according to the rules of the ritual... Yeah, according to the rules of the ritual, that's
very
what happens.
motherly.
Yeah. Well, he basically says, like, let me do it. This is also where...
fight in my stead. What? Okay. Wait, what?
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, they have revealed that she's pregnant, which Paul figured out, and she's like, how the fuck did you know that?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
They don't make a lot of stink about it in the movie, but she is pregnant with another child. As they're breathing in the spice, they always say you shouldn't breathe in spice while you're pregnant. You never know what kind of things could happen to your kid. But
you might turn into a fucking fetus baby that makes your
might make your child rapidly age to that of a 10-year-old, and then like give them like Satan's voice.
Is that what they did in the David Lynch movie with Aaliyah?
Yeah.
That's so fucking funny. Oh, that's great. Spoiler alert.
And also
her daughter does become a character.
Yeah, and also like she has this voice that like sounds like Satan gargling cocaine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that a little bit in this one. That's like they do this weird effect when they're doing the capital T voice where it's like sort of echoey and it gets deeper. When they're like when they're fucking kiosking them, basically.
Yeah. Like, because in the book, the idea behind the voice is that like it's
about subtlety.
They create a voice that's so pleasing that like you just kind of go with it. Whereas
this movie presents the voice in two ways, and I like the first way first. The movie actually opens with a scene of Paul and Jessica having breakfast, and she's telling him, use the voice to make me give you this drink. And the effect that they use is he speaks and we don't hear we see his mouth move, but we don't hear the words come out. And then his voice kind of like plays booming in her ears. And I thought that was that was a nice way of communicating that it is this super effect. But later in the movie, they do kind of resort to like the, untie me. Don't throw me out of the plane. Like, it just gets a very Christian Bale Batman-y in a way that's a little silly. But anyway, during the fight at this point in the movie, we meet Chani, and like Paul is like, "Oh my God, I know you from my dream." She's like, "I literally don't give a fuck. You suck. Get out of here. I'm better than you." Which I thought was really nice, that it wasn't like, in the book, it is very much a meeting of like they're kind of like, "Oh my God, I know you," and then we slowly see
like destined lovers,
yeah. But in the movie, she's just like, I do not care about who you are at all. A lot.
To be fair, or unfair, I guess rather, is kind of another fucking like white savior story trope, you know, like that's how it is in fucking Pocahontas and Avatar and you know all that.
Yeah, which I mean, again, we're faithfully adapting a story from 1965, so I mean, they're picking and choosing their battles in ways that I think mostly work.
But I mean, look, some Orientalism is bound to make its way in there.
So they have the ritual fight. Paul ends up beating the other guy, which surprises the hell out of everybody. They walk out into the desert, and the movie's over.
And it's also a big deal because it's like, it's heavily implied like, oh, this is like obviously Paul's first kill too, so it's like it has an effect on him, which but I'm glad that they like, you know,
that is where the movie ends. That's it. That's the movie.
Which is
so
not gonna lie, I kind of wish
is half a movie.
Kind of wish I just watched the movie. Because, not gonna lie, I'm just, like, trying to piece things together. I'm like, I should have watched the movie.
To be honest with you, Chowder, that's sort of how it was while watching the movie as well. So.
Yeah. So, this is actually something I wanted to ask about. I went in having read the book. I fucking love the book. The book is so expansive and gripping and mind-blowingly good and detailed and compelling. It's so good about how it meets these mysteries out to you bit by bit by bit. And like part of the enjoyment is like every chapter you're piecing together your understanding of the world. But because of my having read it, I had a lot of context for these things. So, Jeff, you haven't seen the movie once. Chowder, you having heard the movie half a time, I guess. Like, not is it good, but like, how does this story hit you guys?
Look, Dune has always been a story that I was interested in, and it's always been on like my books I want to read thing. And it's probably going to be a book I do read thanks to like audiobooks helping me like just go through all the books I want to read. Like right now I'm going through Sherlock Holmes, and it's like
nice.
And you know, it is helpful because I can like just listen to it on an audiobook as narrated by Stephen Fry, and it's great.
That's a great.
This episode is sponsored by Audible.
No. Audible.
Honestly, yeah. But yeah, you know. So like Dune is a book I'll probably try to listen on audiobook at some point. Unrelated note, Sherlock Holmes, like listening to the original Sherlock Holmes story, an interesting experience because, as you know, one, old-timey British racism, but also two, like you get these moments where it's like that, you know, something that the characters don't. Like for example, you know, there's this one case.
Dramatic irony.
Okay, there's this one case where like the initials KKK come up and everyone's going, KKK, who could that be? And you're just thinking the Ku Klux Klan. And
just like things that are much more like culturally, like the tone of the culture has shifted, so we just have absorbed this knowledge in a way that the characters in the book haven't.
And you know, interestingly enough, like the Ku Klux Klan are depicted as just like evil, like a secret society of evil villains. The same way that like we might depict the Nazis today, you know?
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, or like how the Mormons are depicted as just like this secretive cult of assassins or
so you don't even just mean things that the characters don't know that we know, but also things that the author might not have even known. Yeah.
You read The Speckled Bandit, it's like, that's not how snakes work.
Yeah. Wikipedia
like,
was not as heavily regulated back then.
No.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna save part of what I'm gonna say for the ratings, but like it was very interesting, but the movie was such a slog. Like it takes its time with everything, which I think helps the movie in a lot of ways, but also hurts it in some other ways. Like,
yeah, no, I kind of agree,
and
I think
it definitely
took a little too long sometimes.
And there's so much time that it spent like taking too long with things that I'm like, could you maybe have invested more energy in making this movie have like an end rather than just having it be a setup for the next movie? Because it doesn't really feel like a complete film on its own.
It explicitly doesn't, and I think that's pretty ballsy because, I mean, if you look at where it cuts off in the book, it cuts off at the end of quote book 1, Dune.
Right.
So like they're just sort of matching what the book does. So it's like, at what point does this become a very like threading the needle between good adaptation versus good movie? Because you're right.
I mean, it's clearly trying to do what like Lord of the Rings did, where it ended.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So if you look at Lord of the Rings, at the end of the first movie, or at the end of the first Hobbit movie, which is another example of the exercise of, just follow me here. It's another example of the exercise of taking a book and breaking it up into multiple films. So they have to manufacture an ending point that doesn't exist. And I think the first Hobbit movie at least does give you a sense of catharsis about the relationship between Thorin and Bilbo that is manufactured more or less for the movie, but gives the movie a capstone. And Dune does not try to do that at all. This does not feel like a finished movie. People were asking me what I thought about it after walking out. I'm like, I'll be honest, I can't fully form my opinion because I haven't seen the whole movie yet.
That's exactly how I felt when fucking when the first part of the Netflix Masters of the Universe Revelation came out.
Yeah, we just talked about that
part
recently.
one is just like, well, it's more like part one of part one, right? Like now it feels like we've gotten through a full season with part 1 and 2, but it's just like,
and
I've got to reserve my judgment on Dune a little bit because I don't know where the rest of the story takes it,
Yeah, let me. It takes you to some crazy fucking places. Let me tell you, I'm so stoked for part 2. But no, it definitely leaves off in a spot that just it makes it. It's weird. I feel like it shouldn't make it this hard to like assess the movie, but like as a story, it's hard to say like, did it do a good job setting up these threads? I mean, I can compare it to the book, so I think yes, it did. But if I'm judging it on its own merits, I'm like, well, I don't know. I have no idea.
And that's,
it's
that's
really
kind of where
interesting.
I'm at too, where it's just like, it's sort of like all of my problems that I had with it sort of felt like things that I couldn't really blame on the movie itself more than like it adapting Dune. Like, it's just like, I wasn't thrilled with the fact that we spent a lot of time caring about all these characters and then killed most of them off. And it sort of felt like, why did we waste time characterizing that guy in like four different
one
ways?
Of the characters,
you know what I mean? It's
so something that happens in the book. I discussed the idea of the Mentat. So the two characters I pointed out were Thufir Hawat, the short guy that worked for the Atreides, and Peter DeVries, the Dave Demalstian, the polka dot man guy who worked for the Harkonnens. When Duke Leto Atreides bit his tooth and did the big stinky spit, Peter DeVries died. And in the movie, we show him die. But in the movie, we also were never told, this is Peter DeVries. He is a Mentat for the Harkonnens. We just see him talk 2 or 3 times, and then he dies, so you don't really care.
Seems like a fucking, the
what
second in
happens
command kind of speaker for the king kind of person.
Yeah,
in the movie.
Exactly.
Like, a big problem with the book is, like, a lot of what happens in the book happen in the heads of the characters.
It also happens over time.
Over time,
a long period of time.
Yeah, and so, like, there's just all this stuff that couldn't be turned into a movie because... all the characters are thinking stuff.
Yes.
David Lynch tried to solve this
used
problem. David Lynch tried to solve this problem by just...
to pass some time.
Chowder, hit this point because I think I know what you're going to say. Definitely hit this. This is big.
David Lynch tried to solve this problem by just, like, having the camera zoom in on the character's face and then, like, have, like, ADR or just like them narrating without them moving their mouths or anything, and it's like that's us looking at their like inner monologue, which makes for very strange filmmaking where a character just kind of standing there staring at another for like a really long time.
Yeah, this movie does not fall into that trap. But specifically, like, to your point, Jeff, about like, I don't know where this is going. Like, the death of Peter DeVries excites me because what happens in the book is after Peter dies and the Harkonnens invade Arrakis, Thufir Hawat, the Mentat for House Atreides, he's still alive. So the Harkonnens kidnap him and force him to be their Mentat. And we see stories of him performing all these super calculations for the Harkonnens while also trying to figure out, I don't know who else is alive. I don't know if Paul is alive. But I think I can calculate that he is. And we get so much intrigue in that is likely coming in part 2, but we just didn't get to explore it here because, to Chowder's point, the way that we would have to explore it would be very strange filmmaking.
Yeah.
I see. So 2 + 3 × 4 is Paul's alive.
Exactly. Yeah, that is not
Because, like,
compelling.
when I think about the movie, is like, it hardly feels fair to be like, oh, I wish this movie had, like, more of an ending, when it's like, well, I don't really want them to construct one, like, in a way that, like, The Hobbit did, because, like, ultimately, I think that was to the detriment of, you know, of that franchise.
That was, talking about threading that needle, they leaned more toward, let's try to make a good movie, instead of making a good adaptation. And it's like, in a movie that people already feel wishy-washy on, you gotta win adaptation brownie points, which The Hobbit did not, and this movie fucking does.
Yeah, but I don't even think The Hobbit had a good ending or good.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an example of a success. I think it's an example of that kind of decision.
Gotcha.
Right, because, like, with The Hobbit, like, you know, it sets up this thing with him and Thorin as, like, the capstone for the first movie, but then their relationship is just, like, hardly relevant for the rest of the other 2 movies. So it's like, well, then why did we, what? You know? It's like,
I have faith. I have faith that with where Dune Part 2 is going to have to go, because Dune Part 2 has been greenlit. It'll be out in 2 years. They're working on it now. But I have faith that Part 2 is going to pick up on a lot of this stuff in an important way. But, like, it really does not feel like this is the whole movie. And that was on purpose. But it leaves you in a weird spot when you're done, because it is gorgeous, it is concise, it is well acted, it is so thoughtful, but it's not done. That's the one thing it's not. It's not done.
Yep. And I think that, like, I think that's probably a good point for us to move over into the ratings, because I do have more to say, but it's mostly based on, like, qualms or things about the movie that, you know. So I feel like that would be better suited for the ratings section. So you guys want to head on into there?
Let's
the ratings words. Thank you both for a very in-depth discussion. Now we're going to be moving on to the rating section, where each of us asterisks are going to rate the topic on a scale from 1 to 10 sandworms, question mark? I like sandworms.
I like sandworms are pretty big. The Shai Hulud are extremely large creatures.
1 to 10 planets full of cocaine.
I'm not going to lie, that's bigger than sandworms, but I'm not going to lie, a second time in a row, I like that better.
But the sandworms are, like,
iconic.
So iconic.
Well, then we gotta be more. We gotta be more clever about. Stink teeth.
Okay. Let's just split the difference. Sandworms full of cocaine.
Probably.
Well, now you're getting ahead of yourself, Chowder. Oh yeah.
Okay. On a scale from 1 to 10 cocaine worms, how do you feel about Dune? So the reason my asterisk is that, I mean, Chowder hasn't seen it, so obviously he's not going to rate the movie, and, you know, he was already interested in seeing it beforehand, like, you know, you just said to us in our in-between time. But so Chowder, you can give some thoughts at the end, but you don't have to necessarily stick to a rating, because, like, it doesn't quite fit what we're doing for this one. But Colin, I'm going to start off with you. You're the knowledgeable person here on the source material. How did you feel about this movie?
I adore this movie. So I'm a big fan of the director's work. The other movies I've seen of his are 2 of his biggest, Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. Both are fucking masterclasses in, like, thoughtful, methodical sci-fi filmmaking. Like, if you haven't seen Arrival, like, go in blind as best as you can. That movie will take you on a fucking trip like nothing else. It's incredible. So when I found out he was doing Dune, I was like, I should probably read this because I like his movies. I'm gonna want to see it, and it's like I'm so into Lord of the Rings. I have read so much Tolkien material on Lord of the Rings. I gotta give Dune a shot. I read the book in anticipation of the movie and thinking I was like, I want to learn more about the movie, but I fell in love with the book and then immediately became nervous, like, oh God, how are you gonna do this?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna sort of try to split the difference on my rating as how I think it works as an adaptation, how I think it works as a movie. As an adaptation, I'm astonished. I am so grateful to see an adaptation that really tries to communicate the tone of the book and the message of the book without getting tripped up by the detail. And I haven't seen this in an adaptation, I don't think, since the Lord of the Rings films. The books were compared a lot back when they came out. Lord of the Rings was 51, this was 65, so there's a gap there. But here we are, 20 years after the Lord of the Rings movies, and I think these comparisons are going to continue to be made because they're complicated-ass books that are rewarding reads, and the movies somehow fit that into something that makes sense. Because I'm not going to lie, watching Lord of the Rings as a kid and as a teen, I wasn't like, I have such a deep understanding of this world. I'm like, I don't know how the wizards work. I don't know how Sauron's a flaming eyeball. I don't understand why it has to go in the volcano, but fuck, this is a good movie. And then I read the books to understand it. I have had the reverse experience here where I could imagine watching this movie and be like, I don't know what a Kwisatz Haderach is. I don't understand what all these fucking Benny Jezzies are doing in the sandy place, but like I want to learn more about it. I just happen to already know that stuff. So like, I don't know, I'm rambling, but as an adaptation, 10 out of 10. It is a fucking masterclass in how to adapt complex material. And it might be 20 years before we see something like this happen again. Just as a note, I read Foundation and I watched the Foundation TV show. Both of them are good. Not the same. Just not the same. That's an Isaac Asimov book that got adapted into a TV show, and it's different. As a movie, I'm also astonished, but it is still half a movie. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan. For whatever criticism people want to lobby at his films and filmmaking, I enjoy his style of writing and directing tremendously, and I think Dune sort of falls in that camp in a way. It's not nearly as, like self-serious and preachy. It's just trying to tell a story, but I want to make that comparison because I think this is a movie that rewards multiple viewings. Even though I've read the book, watching the movie twice, I picked up on a lot more the second time because it does have that threadbare, simplified plot, but it does cram a lot more detail in there that you might expect. So I think if you're looking for this as a one-and-done movie, you'll be disappointed. If you're prepared to put this as this is one of the things I want to keep on my shelf that I revisit every once in a while, I think that is what this movie is going to be for me. Like Lord of the Rings, something that I always go back to. And as that kind of movie, I'd land at an 8 just because I don't know how it's going to be paid off.
Dune Director Cut.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, we're going to get the director's cut technically when part 2 comes out because then we'll have the full movie. But
I imagine they still had to cut stuff out in part 1.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But
Chowder, did you? I just saw fucking Dune Directors Cut pop up in Google because Colin said Christopher Nolan as someone he really likes, and my mind immediately went, this film wasn't directed by Christopher Nolan, was it? No. So I looked up Dune Director, so I saw the Director's Cut. So when Chowder says Dune Director or Director's Cut, I was thinking, did you just Google the same fucking thing for the same reason?
No, so I'm gonna split the difference. I think as a movie, this is a 7 or 8 out of 10. Because it's not finished. If it were finished, if the second half is as solid as adaptation as this is, I think we're going to have a stellar 2-part movie that might be a 10 out of 10. But I'm going to split the difference. This movie is a 9 for me.
That's a lot of crack worms.
A lot of crack worms.
Yeah, so I think I land a little bit lower than that myself.
You'd be crazy not to.
I've detailed some of my complaints already a little bit. It's it is a slog. It does feel like part of a movie, not an entire movie, which is made more frustrating by the fact that it is also very long and a slog because it's come on,
you didn't get anywhere.
Use some time here. Yeah. The other thing that I haven't really talked about that made the movie a little bit rough to watch is, and this is probably just like a tonal thing for me personally, I wish there was a bit more levity in the story, literally at all. Like, I don't necessarily fucking need the level of like MCU style quips thrown in just for the sake of it or anything like that, but like every single character in this movie was just so serious and kind of miserable, and it made it kind of unengaging in a way that I found it made me disconnect from it a little bit. But I mean, all of that is that's like a tonal thing that I can kind of get past, but that is something that made me disconnect from it a little bit in a way that if I watch Lord of the Rings, which is again I think a very apt comparison, it's long, it's heady, it's got like a lot of things, but also there are characters in it who are having some fun. You know what I mean? And I think it really needs that, because already I find Lord of the Rings kind of a slog to get through, obviously, because it's very long and it's got a lot of things that are hard to keep track of and subtle details that is hard to keep track of if you don't know the source material. And I think that is all present in this as well, and will likely be present in the completed project. But without any of that levity, it makes it less it makes it harder to kind of keep track of all those complexities for me personally. I don't know. And again, all the other things is it really depends on where it's going. And there's something that you just said, Colin, that I think really, feels like how this is going to feel when it's all said and done is complicated but rewarding. Is I felt rewarded for being able to follow any of these things, because it is kind of hard to keep track of, despite the fact that the plot is relatively simple. So it's it does feel like I didn't get out of the movie feeling oh, that was bad. I got out of the movie feeling I could have enjoyed that more if it had these things. You know what I mean? The difference there was it feels very high quality and very well made. And I even though I haven't read the book, I'm always a huge sucker for being very faithful to source material, because I think that it's an important thing to do when adapting things in certain cases, because there's a lot of people that are very purist in terms of their media, and that's not always the thing to cater to. But when a movie is able to successfully do that, I think that's very valuable. But again, without the payoffs for a lot of those setup plot points that are coming later, I have a hard time coming out of this movie being oh, I enjoyed that, I can't wait for more. It's more just I'm gonna reserve judgment a little bit. So it's I'd probably give it teetering between 6 and 7. I think probably I'd land on 7, just because the visuals were great. I am definitely intrigued about where it's going, so it's hooked me. But there are parts of it is okay, I wish this was more of a story. I'd have a hard time recommending it to someone who's not into this thing specifically.
That was the hardest thing that hit me when I walked out of the theater. Was I was expecting to tell my partner she had we were driving home, because I saw the movie and she went and did some other stuff. And I saw the movie, she's was it good? And I was I want to say I loved it, but I also need to make sure I didn't sound like I was saying you should watch Dune, because I kind of don't think she should just.
I loved it. Asterisk. Your mileage may vary.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
That's Colin. That is almost the exact same. That is, well, not the exact same, because I wouldn't say I loved it, but that's a very similar experience that I had, because I was my parents came and visited for Thanksgiving, and me and Michaela were gonna go see it with them, and then Michaela ended up getting busy, so she didn't go see it with us. And then we left the movie, and she was oh, how was the movie? And the first thing I said, it was you would not like this. You would not enjoy this whatsoever. I see the value in it, but for a lot of people, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, which is not, don't misinterpret that as me saying oh, you fucking have to be a certain level of intelligence to get this thing, because even part of it to me is kind of a turn off. You have to
you have to have a certain IQ to understand Rick and Morty.
Yeah, right.
I think a better way to say that is this movie does ask a little more of you than I think most movies do. Not just in like this movie is complicated, but also like faith that the second part of this is going to make sense.
Yeah.
Understanding that this is not building toward its own conclusion. Like, you gotta meet the movie halfway because it is half a movie.
Right.
And that is not necessarily what people are looking for when they're like, do I want to watch Dune? But yeah, Chowder, do you have any... we're going pretty long on this one. Chowder, do you have any thoughts after this conversation or any rating you'd like to slap on anything? Maybe you'd like to rate the 1984 David Lynch adaptation? I don't know.
That's definitely a 2. Anyway.
I really have to watch that at some point, because it's one of those movies that's like, I've heard is very bad, but I think looks very interesting.
It is definitely bizarre. It is definitely like an interesting experience, not a good one, but an interesting one. So like, here's the thing: I'm already wanting to watch the movie. I'm already wanting to read the book. So like, there's not really much for me to say. I guess my rating is just an undefined out of 10. Fill it in when it's possible. Dune's always interested in me because like it's sci-fi that like really thinks about like the inner workings of its world like a very
much
to a very fine degree. Like there are plenty of settings where it's like we're not really here for understanding how this world works. We just want an excuse to do cool stuff, and that's a fine approach to take. But Dune is a very we have this thing. How does this affect the world? We have this little detail. How does that affect the world? How does faster than light travel affect this world? How does blank affect this world? How does like these royal families affect this world? How do worms affect this world? Etc.
How do
that's a really good way of putting it, Chowder, because like that's definitely like that gets to part of like why I would not recommend it to a lot of people, is because like when you look at the movie and the book, I assume since it's so faithful of an adaptation, it's like the characters, they're not much of anything. The characters
are much stronger in the book, for sure.
Fair. But like the characters, the plot for sure is interesting, but is ultimately kind of simple. But the setting and the mechanics are really the complex thing that is fun to dive into. And I think for a lot of people, that's not enough, which is why I wouldn't recommend it to it. But it does go so deep in that specific regard that it's like, it's clear that it's like a, if you don't enjoy this movie, it's not because it's bad, it's because it's not, it's not doing something that a lot of people are, interested in, which is fine. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
not
like
everything has to be for everyone. Yeah.
Right. It's like a specific sort of niche kind of thing.
So before we head out of this conversation, I do want to offer, do either of you have like, do each of you want to ask like one question? Do you have any curiosities about this world that you would like answered? Or is that just me looking for an excuse to talk about the book?
All right, spoil it to me. Explain what spice is.
Jeff, are you okay if I explain this?
I mean, if it's going to be like a big dramatic point in the later story, then I'd probably not want to hear it. But
I don't know how they're going to dramatize it. Worm poop.
Is it a thing that's actually dramatic in the story, like the reveal of it being dramatic, or is it just something that doesn't get explained till later?
No, I'm not going to explain the intricacies of it. No, it's definitely the latter. For me, that was the biggest question in my head in the whole book. What is spice? What is spice? And like I said, you can read through my notes on the book, and it's always me talking about what I think spice is. Very early on in the book, I was like, is this worm poop? And then at the end of the book, I get confirmation. It's worm poop, and I was just like, it's worm poop. I got it. It is worm poop. Spice is essentially,
but it's not
when
like
the
a fucking
it's not
spice is people kind of reveal.
No, spice is so I described what happened in the book with Leavitt Kynes. Well, the worm poop, like it gestates and like it needs to sit and like ferment, I guess, and like the way it interacts. The book is very detailed about how it interacts with the rest of the ecosystem. It then sort of becomes spice, and then it's purified through a process that is sort of dramatic, so I won't get into any of that. But yeah, it's worm poop.
And they use that worm poop for base travel, getting high.
To quote Zendaya in the movie, worm poop is the most valuable thing in the galaxy.
Gotcha. All right.
Fucking, that reminds me though, another complaint I had about this is that Like, and like you can write this off, but like the fucking size of the worms was kind of inconsistent in this movie. And like,
That's
you could say
the worms are all very different sizes. The book actually measures them individually.
Sure.
There are massive worms and then much smaller worms.
And to be fair, the size of worms in real life are pretty inconsistent.
Right. No, it's one of those things though where it's like, okay, that all makes sense and it's clearly justifiable, but it is notable to me in the movie how whenever a worm shows up, the thing that it's eating is always the same size in comparison to it than every other time that we see it. You know, so it feels like it's a widely weird scale because like when the worm comes up and eats the people, it's a worm that is sized where it's like maybe 4 times, its mouth is like 4 times larger than the people. And when the worm shows up and eats the spice mining thing, it's sized where the mouth is 4 times larger than the spice mining thing. So it feels very like weirdly disconnected where it's like there's never a mention of like, oh, that's a little one, that's a big one. It's just
the
like,
book does actually
okay, I know those could be different sizes, but that feels very inconsistent.
Okay, fair. All right.
Anyway.
Very cool. Jeff, do you have any book questions before I shut my mouth?
I've got questions, but they're all things that I feel like are going to be presented as answers to me in the next film. So they're not things I want answers to right now, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, no.
Like there's nothing about this movie specifically that I feel like I need cleared up because I feel like all the things that I'm wondering about are things that I'm not supposed to know the answers to currently.
Makes sense.
If that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap it up. Thank you for listening to the Common Geeking program. Again, I've been your host, Jeff Leavitt. You can find me. I've got a YouTube channel that I do toy reviews, if that's your thing. That's called Alchemist Prime Reviews on YouTube. And again, I've been joined by Colin and Chowder. Either of you have things you want to toss out there?
Nah, I'm so busy playing Halo lately. You can check out other podcasts, but I'm playing Halo. I'm busy.
Yeah, I'm Timo or Chowder, whichever you prefer. I'm actually pretty busy for the next couple of weeks.
I'm not fucking telling anyone to reach out to you guys for lunch.
But if you like hit me up, we can like plan something out in a couple of weeks. Don't worry about it. My Twitter
Chowder will schedule you in.
I'll schedule. Yeah, I'll pencil you in somewhere.
Pin you on the calendar.
Anyways, I got a Twitter at TimeOldChowder. I'm also on our sister podcast Dice Populi. We just finished recording an episode of Entrenched. I just suck at role-playing games, I guess.
Nah, man, that was super funny. I loved everything about how you played that. So fucking good. That's a Patreon bonus thing for those who are curious.
All right.
It's so funny.
Anyways, yeah. Ciao.
Well,
oh wait, no, I gotta wait for the ciao. Yeah.
All right, so you gotta wait. Chowder's done with the episode. Jeff and I are gonna finish it apparently.
That's how Chowder left the last Common Geeking program too, because we fucking scheduled it bad, and we ended up Jocelyn and I ended up talking about whatever the fuck we were talking
Squid
about
Game.
for much
It
longer.
was the Squid Game episode.
I've got work. Oh, yeah. Squid Game, right? Yeah.
All right, take us out, Jeff.
Anyway, our next episode of the Common Geeking program is going to be another Common Briefing program where we will talk about the geek news for the month of December, and maybe, I don't know, we could do something kind of special about the whole year if we wanted to.
We might.
That episode will be airing on the first Friday in January, which thankfully is the 7th, meaning that the 1st of January is on a Saturday, which gives us a little bit of wiggle room.
A little bit of extra time.
And the next episode of the regular Common Geeking programs, where we'll do a deep dive on another topic, will be on the 3rd Friday in January, which will be the 21st. Oh, God, the 21st of January. That's so far from now. I love that.
That is. No, it's ridiculously far. Hey, maybe we'll talk about the new Spider-Man, unless it sucks, but who knows?
You know what's not going to suck? Probably.
What's not going to suck, probably?
Spider-Verse across the...
Oh, yeah, we got a sweet,
except
juicy
we
teaser.
We fucking cannot talk about that in January of 2022.
Since that movie's coming out in October.
That'll be a November of 2022 kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I have to go make some mac and cheese, so I'm on my way out.
Anyway, thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing, and everything that you do, and we will talk to you next time. Now is the place for the chow, though. Oh, dur. Then this is the longest dur.
Belated dur.
Belated dur.
This episode of the Common Geeking Program is hosted by Jeff Leavitt, joined by Colin Ketchen and Untitled Chapter. This episode is sponsored by Space Heaters, the only thing getting me through this sudden cold snap. The podcast is created and produced by myself and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me. Music and stuff also by me. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to ring in the new year with a new briefing program on all the geek stuff that's happened up till now. And we'll probably have an episode on Spider-Man No Way Home after that. Just because we all saw it and we all have feelings. But we will talk to you then, and thank you for listening to this.
Right. And that is not necessarily what people are looking for when they're like, do I want to watch Dune?
When you said half a movie, you cut off halfway, and it's like, wow, that's kind of appropriate. So it was half a sentence. Yeah.